But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Over a 20-minute period from 2015 to 2016, an observer looked through around 2,000 obituaries in the New York Times. And they found one word in common. Throughout 2,000 obituaries over a 20-month period, they found the word help. He helped the poor. He helped by serving in the Salvation Army. She was known for her acts of service and the way she helped. But the greatest among you, whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. I don't know if you saw it this week, but there's a commercial that went around talking about Dwayne Wade. Now, this week, if you follow the NBA at all, you know that two of the greatest players of all time, Dwayne Wade and Dirk Nowitzki, retired. They said, we're calling it quits. We're done. And to honor Dwayne Wade, one of the things that he has done all year, because he knew this is my last season from the very beginning, he said, I'm done. After every single game, he has traded jerseys with the players who are great in the game right now. He's taking pictures, he's traded jerseys with them, and there's this commercial to honor him. That look, he's got all of these jerseys, but he's missing 5. And so you see the commercial start, and you see him standing in the middle of the court, and he's got jerseys sitting behind him, and he's standing there alone going, I have no clue what's happening. And one by one, somebody walks out. A girl who really wanted to go to college, but her family couldn't afford college, and his foundation paid for her to go to college. A mom whose family lost everything in a house fire 10 days before Christmas and had gotten a call that Dwayne Wade wants to take you home. A young man who 12 years previously had been in school, and Dwayne talked about the importance of starting your career and making sure that you work hard, and he heard the message. A lady whose brother had been one of the victims in the Parkland shooting, who Dwayne had written her brother's name on his shoe before a game. And Dwayne Wade's mom said, you know what, I didn't always live the greatest. You saw me at my lowest when I had lost hope and I was addicted to drugs. And yet you never stopped. You never stopped. You never stopped. Over and over and over, story after story of a person who had been impacted by this man who's 13-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 3-time NBA champion, MVP in 2006, all because this man had stepped up to the plate and done something off the court that was bigger than on the court. Each one, the girl whose brother died, handed him a jersey. This is the jersey my brother wore in his final game in his final championship. My family wants you to have it. Young man, this is the blazer I wore to my first job interview. Thank you. The family handing him something that he had given to them. His mom said, here's the robe that you bought me, or that you bought for me when you bought me at church. The stars. Plant over and over, these people said, here, we're going to acknowledge you for what you have done off the court more than what you have done on the court. But whoever would be great among you must be your servants. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You know, for Jesus, the tireless pursuit of the cross began with the decision to serve. The tireless pursuit of the cross began with the decision to serve. We're going to be in Mark 8 through 11 today. It starts on page 843. And we are at a point where next week we get to celebrate Easter. I'm so excited. I love Easter. But you know what? Really, this is what we celebrate every single Sunday. The resurrection of Jesus. And if there is no resurrection, if this had not happened, this core aspect of our faith, if the resurrection were ever disproved, if it had not happened, happened, then guess what? We wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be able to meet. We wouldn't be able to sit in these chairs and gather together. And millions of people all over the world would not be able to celebrate who Jesus is. But the resurrection has never been disproven. And for us, it seems like we just celebrated Christmas. It's been 4 months. For Jesus, it was 33 years between these two events. Between the time when he was born for one specific purpose. To die, forgive us of our sins that we might have life. That's why Jesus came to earth. And on Easter, we celebrate the fact that a man died and rose again 3 days later, just like he said he would. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And over these 3 chapters, really Mark 8, 9, and 10, we see that Jesus has one specific purpose in mind: to go to Jerusalem. And the road to Jerusalem for Jesus is the road to the cross. The road to his death, to his burial, to being handed over, to be killed, and in 3 days to rise. But what I want us to see, beginning in Mark 8, is that something happened all throughout the course of this. That Jesus continually told his disciples what would happen, and they continually missed it. And sometimes I think we miss it. And so let's just remind ourselves of what Jesus did. In chapter 8, we see this. He feeds 4,000 people. He's teaching the crowds. The crowds would always follow Jesus, and he's teaching them. This large group of people are going, we have no food. And he says, okay, do we have anything? Okay, you've got 7 loaves of bread, great. Okay, let's feed everybody. 7 loaves of bread, he feeds them. And then the Pharisees are like, hey, give us a sign that you really are Jesus. He said, I'm not going to. Sorry, that's not going to happen. And then his disciples hop in a boat, and they cross the river, and they've forgotten bread. They cross the lake into the sea, and they've forgotten bread. And Jesus is like, why are you worried about this? Did you not just see what happened? Didn't you just see what I did? But don't worry about that. Just beware of what the Pharisees are preaching. Beware of the yeast and the leaven in their bread. And then they end up in Bethsaida, and you know what Jesus does? He heals a blind man. He touches his eyes, and he goes, do you see anything? Well, I see people, I think, like walking around like trees. He goes, okay, good, let me touch you again. Now what do you see? I see clearly. His eyes were opened. And I don't think it's a mistake that immediately after that, they're walking along the road, and in verse 27 of chapter 8, we see this. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, while they're walking, Jesus never stopped. You notice this? He never stopped. He continually had the conversation. On the way, he asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they told him, John the Baptist. And others say Elijah. And others, one of the prophets. And he asked them, but who do you say that I am? Peter answered, you are Christ. And he warned him not to tell anyone. It's so interesting here that Peter was actually charged with not telling anyone who Jesus was at that time. And he said, don't tell anybody who I am. I want to keep it a secret for now. The opposite is true of us and of Peter later after the resurrection when Jesus says, go tell everyone. And we're commanded to tell the whole world. Peter actually confesses Jesus in this moment. He's like, you are the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the one we've waited for. You are the one that's going to set all things right. You are the one we want. You know, when we confess Christ, it means that we are to then tell people. We're also to follow. And when we confess Christ and we say, I'm going to follow you wherever you go. And this is exactly what Jesus is getting at with his disciples. Look at what happens next. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. This is the first time that Jesus tells us of his death, burial, and resurrection. Like he says, here's what's going to happen. The Son of Man, his favorite name for himself while on earth, must suffer many things, and he'll be rejected by the chief priests and the scribes, the religious leaders. He'll be killed, and guess what? After 3 days, he's going to rise again. Really simple, and he spoke plainly to them about this. Jesus is getting to this point where Jerusalem's Jerusalem's the only direction he's headed. This is his decision. He knows what it's going to be. He knows Jerusalem leads to the cross, but he's saying, look, this is where I am going. And this is exactly what's going to happen to me when we're there. He's speaking very plainly. Peter, you are the Christ. Jesus, okay, cool. I'm going to be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes. Are going to kill me, and then we're going to go on. What happens? Well, Peter does this. He says, not going to happen. This is not going to happen, Jesus. Peter took him aside. Hey, Jesus, come here. Let me talk to you. He begins to rebuke him. No, that's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. And Jesus is noticing everybody else around him. He looks at all of the disciples, right? Just the 12 are with him right now. He looks at the disciples, and he rebukes Peter. He says, get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. It's an interesting thing here where Peter is like, no, not going to happen. Like, Peter forgot who's in charge. He forgot who he's following. He's going, no. And Jesus is going, Peter, you're missing the whole thing. You are missing it. It's not about you. It's not about what you want. It's not about what you're going to do. He's rebuking him. And he's going, okay, come on. Like, what's going on here, Peter? There's something bigger than these moments. Get behind me. Like in this moment, he's going, Peter, are you really concerned about the things of God or the things of man? What is the most important thing to you? Like, what are you really worried about? And then Jesus goes, okay, crowds, come here. Hey, I know you're kind of all hiding back while I'm talking to these bobats. Crowds, come here. I want to talk to you. Here's what he says. He calls the crowds to him and he says, this, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. Like, in other words, carry your cross to your death. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? What can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and simple generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with holy angels. Jesus is looking at all of these people, and he's looking at his disciples. He goes, okay, here's the deal. You followed me for 3 years. If you really want to follow me, then here it is. Deny yourself. Take up your cross, which basically means walk to your death, and follow me. Follow wherever I go, wherever I lead. If you want to save your life, then you lose it for my sake and for the sake of the gospel. If you want to actually do, have a great life, then you follow me in this. What profit is it? What good does it do for you to gain the whole world only to lose your soul? What good is it to work for everything you can here, to get as much as you can here, if it only costs you your soul? Oh wait, that's everything. The only part of us that lives for eternity. And if you're ashamed of Jesus Christ while here on earth, then he's going to be ashamed of you in heaven. And he's just laying it out here. And he's not just speaking to his disciples, who he's telling very plainly what's going to happen. I love that he goes, here, you 12, let me just tell you, because nobody else is going to get it. They're all going to deny it. They're not going to let it happen. It has to happen. You see, if you're ashamed of me here, then are you ashamed of me? Then I'll be ashamed of you there. The question we have to ask ourselves is the question really Jesus asked Peter, are you more concerned, or am I more concerned with the things of God or with the things of man? If Jesus calls me to follow, and it looks foolish to my family, am I going to follow him, or am I going to listen to my family? If I lead out and I say, look, I really believe that Jesus is calling me to go do something crazy, and everybody else is looking at me going, you're nuts. Yeah, I know I am, but I cannot get this out of my mind that the Spirit is leading me to do something big for the kingdom, and everybody else is going, no, you stay, and it's like, I can't. I mean, if you think about it like this, where is Jesus headed? Jerusalem. He's talking along the road. Side note, isn't it interesting our best conversations often happen in the car while we're traveling along the road? Why would Jesus go to Jerusalem if he knew that he would suffer, be rejected, and be killed? The Son of Man did not come to be served, to serve, give his life for many. Follow the Lord God. Let him. So he calls the crowd. He says this. He's like, come on, follow me, people. Let's figure this out. And then he takes just 3 disciples aside. Peter, James, and John, we see this in chapter 9, and he takes them up to the mountain, and he is transfigured in front of them. That's a big word, which basically means they saw Jesus in his actually he is, shining white light. And Elijah and Moses are with him, and Peter, James, and John are going, this is crazy cool. Let's set up some things here. We can just worship you here, some booths. And Jesus is like, that's not what it's about. Like, Elijah has already come, and they did with him whatever they pleased. And John the Baptist has already come, but there's something bigger. And even look at that. God speaking out, this is my son. I'm well pleased. Listen to him. And then they come down from the mountain and they see a great crowd around the other disciples, and they're trying to cast out a demon from a boy, and they can't. And Jesus says, let me do it. I got this. Let me do this. And then they went on from there, verse 30, and passed through Galilee. Now they're just traveling. They just keep going toward Jerusalem. And Jesus did not want anyone to know. Like, he didn't want anybody to know where he is. It's very rare that you see this, like Jesus is going, hey, let's just keep it us. But in this instance, we see that it's just Jesus, just the disciples. He didn't want anyone to know where he was because he was teaching them. And he's saying to them this. He's saying, the Son of Man, he is looking at this and he's going, look, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him. When he is killed, after 3 days, he will rise. But they did not understand the saying and were afraid. Ask him. This is the second time that Jesus tells of his death, his burial, and his resurrection. And we see something different this time. Like the first time, what we see is he's given just, the chief priests, the scribes are going to take him, he's going to be killed 3 days later, right? Jesus gives more detail. He says the Son of Man is going to be delivered up. Some of your translations probably say betrayed. It's the same thing. He's going to be delivered or betrayed into the hands of man. And what are they going to do? Well, they're going to kill him. Like, this is what we see over and over and over. They will kill him, and 3 days later, he will rise. But they didn't understand what he was saying. They were afraid to ask him. He's talking to those people that are closest to him. He's saying, look, here, let me very plainly tell you what's happening. But they're afraid to ask him what's going on. Why would this be? Have you ever been in a situation where you're afraid to ask the question? Maybe you think back to school and your teacher gives you instructions and everybody else seems to get it and you don't. You're a little embarrassed to ask the question. And I don't understand. Maybe afraid of being pointed out as somebody who doesn't get what's going on. Maybe the disciples are afraid because they already saw Peter get called out by Jesus, and Jesus is going, Peter, come on. Like, no. Things of God, not the things of man. You're thinking wrong. The disciples are afraid to ask Jesus what's going to happen. I mean, why is this? They're kind of chicken a little bit. They're worried what's going to happen. Maybe it's just that they don't want it to happen. Maybe they're afraid to ask because they know the reality of the situation. I don't know. But what we see next is this. They're going along the road. They came to Capernaum, and Jesus goes, hey guys, what were you talking about? What were you talking about as we walked? Why were you shoving and pushing and trying to get in front of each other? You ever been in an elementary school line when everybody's trying to get in front of the other one? Yeah. Why are you shoving each other? Why? What are you talking about back there? And they're going, well, just, we wanted to see who was the greatest. But they kept silent. They didn't tell him. And then Jesus does what Jesus can only do, and he sits down, right? And he calls them to himself, and he says this, if anyone would want to be first, he must be last of all and a servant of all. You want to be first or last. And he takes a little child, and he puts the child in the middle of them, and he holds the child, and he says, look, if you can receive a child like I received this child, then you're receiving me. You can receive those who are in need, like I'm receiving this child who's in need, and you receive me. But not only me, you're receiving the Father, the one who sent me. Jesus is going, look, I am going to Jerusalem. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be turned over. Like, this leads to the cross. I mean, this is what this is about. This is just leading Jesus to the cross. That's what Jerusalem did, and the disciples are missing it. He's telling them very plainly, here's what's happening, and all they're concerned about is which one of us is the greatest. Like, which one of us gets the most favor because of you, God? Which one of us do you care about the most? He's like, it's not about that. You want to be great? become the least. They're arguing on the road about who is the greatest. And then John comes to him and says, hey, like this person was casting out demons in your name, and Jesus does this whole, who's not against us is for us. And then he says, don't lead somebody to tempt others. Don't lead people to temptation. He teaches about divorce. And then he says, let the little children come to me. And then this rich man, all the crowds are there. This rich man comes to him in 10:17, and he's like setting his journey. He's going, hey, what do I have to do to follow you? Just like follow the commands. You know what they are? Yeah, I know what they are. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus is like, great, you know it. But now go sell everything. Your money is holding you back. Jesus talks about money more than anything else in the Gospels, more than anything else. That money holds us back from following him. This tight grip that we think we have to have, and he's saying, no, serve me with it. The rich young man is like, it's impossible for a rich man. Like, it's so hard for a rich man to come to know God. Easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to come to God, because he's so hanging on to these things and not letting go and going, okay, God, you got this. In verse 31, many who are first will be last, and the last first will be first. And in Mark 10:32, the third time Jesus tells of his own death, burial, and resurrection, they were going up to Jerusalem. Anytime you travel toward Jerusalem, it's always up. And Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. Why would they be amazed and afraid? Following Jesus. You followed this man for 3 years. You have walked in the dirt that he has kicked up. You have slept in the same house as him. You have slept in the field in the same proximity. You have watched him perform miracle after miracle after miracle. You've watched the Pharisees and the scribes come at him over and over and over again. And yet, Jesus continues to walk to Jerusalem. And everybody knows what's going to happen when he gets to Jerusalem, because he said it very plainly. They're amazed that he would continue in this direction, and they're afraid because they know what's going to happen. Maybe they're afraid because they're not sure what's going to happen to them. Maybe they're afraid because Jesus isn't coming like they expected him. Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, this little group of people, Jesus begins to tell them what was saying with more detail. We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days, he will. Mark is just telling this story over and over and over that Jesus is coming. He's coming to do something different than anybody has expected. He is coming to die. He's headed to Jerusalem for this one purpose, this one singular purpose. And what happens is that every single time, when we see it again, here's the third time, Jesus says, here's what's going to happen. James and John start jockeying for position. They come up to him with their mom, and they're like, hey, Jesus, we got a question for you. Little kids, hey, can we sit at your right hand and left hand in heaven? Can we do that? Can we be those positions? And she's like, guys, that's not for me to give. But I can tell you this. You will drink the cup that I drink, and you will be baptized in the death that I will baptize. You are going to die for my sake. And everybody else becomes indignant with him. And everybody else is going, okay, what are these guys doing? And what does Jesus do? He gets his disciples, and he says this. Jesus called them to him, verse 42. You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. They boss them around. And their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many. The disciples missed it. Jesus kept saying, look, I'm coming to serve. The first shall be last. The greatest among you needs to make himself the lowest, needs to be a servant. Needs to give up that which he's striving for, this whole world, trying to gain as much as you can and be a servant. Didn't you see it in Mark 8, 9, and 10? It all leads to that. He feeds the crowds. He's serving them. He's not giving the Pharisees what they want because they're just going, hey, give us a sign. He's like, no, it's better to serve you like this. He heals a blind man. He opens his eyes and gives him sight to serve him. He tells the disciples what's going on to serve them. He shows everybody else, all the crowds, look, here's how you follow. You want to serve me, you want to follow me, this is what you do. You serve me by denying yourself, by taking up your cross, and following me wherever I lead. The transfiguration was to show disciples exactly who he is, what he's doing. He heals a kid that has a demon in him, a demon-possessed man. He tells of his resurrection. Again, he casts out demons. He teaches them how not to sin, not to give into temptation. He teaches about divorce. He brings children and says, serve them like I do. Like, love these kids well. He teaches a rich man about serving him. Like, give up what you have. Don't worry so much about what you have as much as the loving me part. Follow that. He tells of his death. He tells James and John what's going on. Don't be so concerned about this. I can't give you the right and the left, but I can tell you, I came not to be served, but to serve, and that is causing me to give my life as a ransom for many. And then what does Jesus do in verse 10? Or right after that? He heals Bartimaeus, another blind man. He continually opens people's eyes to what he is doing. The tireless pursuit of Jesus, of the cross, began with Jesus' decision to serve. And that decision, the cross of Jesus, leads us to do the same. It leads us to serve in the same way. So what does Jesus say? Well, he says this, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus never jockeyed for position. The disciples did. Jesus didn't shy away from serving, even though it meant costing him. It cost him everything. He followed to the cross. He followed wherever God would lead. His disciples, as Jesus' disciples, are we willing to serve as he did? Are we willing to actually follow where he leads? We're going to say it may look crazy to the world, but I'm going to follow because he's calling me to follow. I'm going to serve because he's calling me to serve. I'm going to do what he's asking me to do. Where are you serving? I mean, if this is what Jesus says, the greatest will be the least, and you're going to be a servant, he's the servant of all, then how are we following him by serving? Are we making ourselves the least, or are we always jockeying for position to be the greatest? Are we always making it about us and what we do, or are we making it about Jesus and what he has done? You know, today is Palm Sunday, week before Easter. A Holy Week. Like, this is the week when so many things happen in Jesus' life. And it began like this. Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem, to the cross, to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples and said to them, go into the village in front of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find a colt tied on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it. And if anyone says to you, why are you doing this? Say, the Lord has need of it, and we'll send it back here immediately. And they went away and found a colt tied at a door outside the street, and they untied it. And some of those standing there said to him, what are you doing untying the colt? And they told him what Jesus had said, and they let them go. And they brought the colt to Jesus, and they threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. And many spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut from the fields. And those who went before and those who followed were shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest. And he entered Jerusalem. I think Palm Sunday is amazing. I think it's amazing that people stopped and they threw everything down. They put branches down and their cloaks on the donkey, and they followed Jesus. They praised him. They honored him. But when he entered Jerusalem, he knew exactly what was going to happen, because the road to Jerusalem, Jesus is the road to the cross. Man, it's exactly what it is. He had prepared for this moment. His entire life he had prepared for this moment. His closest followers knew what would happen after that, because he told them, we're going to Jerusalem. Here is what will happen when we get to Jerusalem. They didn't know when. They didn't know how. They didn't know how he would be betrayed. I mean, Judas did, but nobody else did. They didn't know what was going to happen. Jesus said, look, we're just going. I think for a moment the disciples may have had this thought, man, everybody's praising you. Why in the world are you going to be betrayed? How is this going to happen? And yet, we know, less than a week later, everybody flipped. Everybody changed what they were going to do, because Jesus was simply focused on the cross. And if the disciples had paid attention and not been worried about where their greatness came from, they would have seen it. He knew he had to enter, but it was never about being the greatest. It was never about being praised in that way. It was always about heading to the cross. It was always about serving. Jesus came to serve. He calls us to do the same. He calls us to go even though we don't know the outcome, to follow even though we don't know what he's doing. He knew that it meant he would die, but he rose again for our salvation. The tireless pursuit of the cross began with the decision to serve. That decision gives us grace and freedom. And the cross, because of the cross, we get to follow Jesus and we get to serve him. It leads us to serve. I want you to think a moment about the world around you. You know, we talk all the time about connecting Christ to where you live. The unique opportunities that you have to serve your neighbors and your friends and your family and your coworkers in the name of Jesus. Maybe it's serving here. Maybe it's just looking out to the world and going, there are needs that I can fill. And that only I can fill. That I can uniquely do this because it's what God has called me to do. Places where you can become the least and you never thought you would go. But God says, I want you to go. I had Mother Teresa in my head all week, working with the lepers and the poorest of the poor in Calcutta. With her life. Because it was never about being the greatest. It was simply about following where Jesus led her to serve. We each have uniquely been given a place to serve, and we each need to ask ourselves, what is he calling me to do? If Jesus fixed his eyes on the steps of Jerusalem, knowing that it would end in his death and resurrection, it would cost him his life, may we fix our eyes on Jesus, knowing that it may cost us everything, but it's worth it in eternity. And we keep our eyes and minds focused on the things of God and not on the things of man. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.